It was Joe Biden's first chance to define how he will be judged by history. In a rare televised address from the Oval Office on Wednesday night, his first public comments since he abruptly ended his re-election bid on Sunday, he spoke of his accomplishments. He spoke of his humble roots. He sang the praises of the American people. He said the future of American democracy lies in their hands. What he didn't do, despite saying he would always level with Americans, was provide a direct explanation for the biggest question of the day. He didn't say why he has become the first incumbent president to abandon a re-election bid just a few months before voting begins. And that is what the history books will be most interested in. He hinted at it, he talked around it, but he never tackled it head-on. It was left for the American people to read between the lines. In recent weeks, Mr. Biden said, "It's become clear to me that I need to unite my party." He then echoed what has become a growing chorus among Democrats, that it was time to pass the torch to a new generation. While he said his accomplishments, which he listed in detail, merited a second term in office, he added that nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy, and that includes personal ambition. Left unsaid was the cold, hard reality that he resigned because it was becoming increasingly clear that he was going to lose to Donald Trump in November, and that is an outcome that those in his party universally view as catastrophic. Trailing in the polls, embarrassed by a miserable debate performance, and with a growing chorus in the Democratic Party calling for him to step aside, there was no clear path to a Biden victory. While the president may not have said it, his Republican predecessor, and now former rival for the White House, had no such qualms. At a rally in Charlotte, North Carolina, a few hours before the address, Donald Trump said Mr. Biden dropped out because he was losing badly. Then he went on the attack against Kamala Harris, the party's new presumptive nominee, claiming that she was a radical left lunatic and the ultra-liberal driving force behind every single Biden catastrophe. Republican groups have been flooding the airwaves in key battleground states in an attempt to define Ms. Harris in their terms, not hers. According to research by the Associated Press, Trump's side is slated to outspend their Democratic counterparts 25-1 over the course of the next month. One advertisement had been saying Ms. Harris was complicit in covering up the president's obvious mental decline. Mr. Biden's speech offered a nationally televised, primetime opportunity to provide a rebuttal to the attacks against his vice president, and to firmly address concerns about his ability to continue to fulfill his presidential duties. It was an opportunity he mostly passed on. Towards the end of his speech, the president did talk up his running mate. He said Ms. Harris was experienced, tough, capable, and an incredible partner for me and a leader for our country. They were strong words, but there weren't many of them. He spent more time discussing Benjamin Franklin than he did his vice president, the person he endorsed on Sunday, and the one who will be the most important torch carrier for his legacy in the months ahead. With little cover from the president, Ms. Harris and her team will have to decide whether and how to respond to the withering Republican attacks in the coming days. Mr. Biden may have another chance to tout his former running mate at the Democratic Convention in Chicago next month, but this is a delicate time for the new presumptive nominee as her campaign is just lifting off the ground and Americans are still getting to know her. The president may have been uncomfortable being overly political in this what could be his final Oval Office address. But if he is concerned about his legacy, Harris's success or failure, more than anything else he does from here on out, matters. It will determine whether history judges him as man who made a noble sacrifice, or one who put his party at risk by selfishly holding on to power for too long. Subscribe to our channel for more updates. Thanks for watching. US President Joe Biden has told Americans in a televised address that it's time to pass the torch to a new generation as he sought to explain the historic decision to end his faltering re-election campaign. Mr. Biden, 81, said he withdrew his candidacy and endorsed U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris to unite their fellow Democrats and the country. The White House speech marked his first public appearance since he exited the race on the 21st of July, paving the way for Ms. Harris to run for the party's nomination. The Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, meanwhile, said at a rally that Ms. Harris was a radical left lunatic. Opinion polls so far indicate a tight race between the former president and Ms. Harris in a hypothetical matchup. In his address on Wednesday night, Mr. Biden spoke for 11 minutes from the Oval Office, with his wife, Jill, son, Hunter, and daughter, Ashley, in the room alongside some key White House staff. "I revere this office," he said, "but I love my country more. I have decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation," added Mr. Biden, who has been in public office for over half a century. "That is the best way to unite our nation." The president vowed to finish the job for the American people before the end of his term in January next year and called Ms. Harris, 59, an experienced, tough, capable partner. Mr. Biden said he believed his record warranted a second term. "But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy," he continued. "That includes personal ambition. The great thing about America is here. Kings and dictators do not rule. The people do. History is in your hands. The power is in your hands. The idea of America lies in your hands." As they were being ushered out of the room, the White House press corps heard applause from family members and staff as the president spoke softly. Mr. Biden did not mention the 3 weeks of mounting pressure he had faced from top Democrats and donors to step aside in the wake of his disastrous debate performance against Trump late last month. Trump, 78, posted on his social media platform, Truth Social, on Wednesday night that the president was barely understandable and so bad. Speaking earlier in the day at a rally in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Republican attacked both Ms. Harris and Mr. Biden, whom he called the most damaging president in U.S. history. For 3.5 years, lying Kamala Harris has been the ultra-liberal driving force behind every single Biden catastrophe, he said. "She is a radical left lunatic who will destroy our country if she ever gets the chance to get into office." At a White House news briefing earlier in the day, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said Mr. Biden's exit was not about his health, but declined to give further details. She also denied to reporters there had been any cover-up over Mr. Biden's cognitive abilities. Ms. Harris, for her part, is hitting the campaign trail. Earlier on Wednesday, she addressed the historically black Zeta Phi Beta sorority in Indianapolis, telling members that her new campaign is not playing around and asked for their help to get elected. "In this moment, I believe we face a choice between two different visions for our nation, one focused on the future, the other focused on the past," she said. "And with your support, I am fighting for our nation's future." She would be the first black South Asian American and woman president, though she needs black voters to turn out in November. However, Black Lives Matter, the activist group, said in a statement on Tuesday that Democrats were seeking to manipulate black voters by installing Ms. Harris at the behest of billionaire donors in a blatant disregard for democratic principles. Mr. Biden is the first sitting president not to seek re-election since 1968, when Lyndon Johnson halted his campaign as his popularity sank during the Vietnam War. Some Republicans have called for Mr. Biden to step down now as president, arguing that he cannot run the country if he cannot run for office, a charge the White House has rejected. On Thursday, Mr. Biden is expected to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House, as well as with the families of U.S. hostages still being held in Gaza. Subscribe to our channel. There are many glass ceilings a Kamala Harris presidency could shatter. One of them is that she could be the first black sorority member to sit in the Oval Office. The U.S. Vice President, who spoke on Wednesday at the biennial convention of Zeta Phi Beta, is a lifetime member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. The two organizations are among the predominantly black sororities and fraternities that make up the National Pan-Hellenic Council. Commonly called the Divine Nine, its nearly 4 million members are poised to become a secret weapon as Ms. Harris seeks the presidency. less than 24 hours after Joe Biden endorsed his deputy to seek the Democratic nomination in his place, the group vowed to launch an unprecedented voter registration, education, and mobilization drive. As a non-profit, the National Pan-Hellenic Council is non-partisan and cannot officially endorse Ms. Harris. But it is promising a campaign that will activate the thousands of chapters and members in our respective organizations to ensure strong voter turnout in the communities we serve. That is in line with how the Divine Nine historically gets behind its own. Its members have supported Ms. Harris, 59, in the past, as she climbed the ladder of national politics. Greek life on US university campuses typically evokes images of young white men or women living together in group houses and drinking booze out of red solo cups. But Black Greek letter clubs emerged at the turn of the 20th century as support systems that offered kinship to Black students experiencing segregation and social isolation at majority white institutions. The first Black fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, began as a study group at Cornell in 1906, according to the Divine Nine, The History of African American Fraternities and Sororities by Lawrence C. Ross. Its membership has included civil rights icon Martin Luther King Jr., former Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, and Olympic gold medalist Jesse Owens. Ms. Harris pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha, the nation's oldest Black sorority, as a senior or fourth-year student at Howard University in Washington, D.C. She has previously said the experience changed my life. Both in its individual parts and as a collective, the Divine Nine is built around shared values of scholarship, civic engagement, and community service. It has lobbied in the past for everything from federal anti-lynching legislation and women's suffrage to high school tutoring and financial aid opportunities for Black youth, according to Mr. Ross's book. Membership is for life, he writes, which is almost spiritual and makes you realize that your life on earth has more meaning than just your own selfish needs. Of her AKA connection, Ms. Harris said in 2019, "Throughout your life, you find friends who become family, and like family, they help shape you and your life experiences. For me, that was the women of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Inc., who became my sisters." That year, as the then California senator launched a campaign for president, her fellow sorors canvassed and phone banked to get out the vote. When she became Mr. Biden's running mate, images of AKAs and other Divine Niners, accessorized with heels and pearls, went viral for their stroll to the polls in Atlanta, in the battleground state of Georgia. The Biden-Harris ticket went on to narrowly win the state, powered in part by strong Black turnout. Though Ms. Harris's candidacy for the November 2024 election is only a few days old, the backing of her sisters is already proving consequential. On a Sunday night Zoom call, the group Win with Black Women, which includes several Divine Nine members, helped raise more than $1 million, $775,000, in roughly 3 hours for the nascent campaign. "People are just energized," Crystal Sewell, an AKA leader, told CBS News, the BBC's US partner, "and really excited about possibilities as it relates to VP Harris and her candidacy." Ms. Harris, who is seeking to make history as America's first female president, is leaning into that enthusiasm. Speaking to 6,000 fired-up Zeta Phi Beta women at a convention center in Indianapolis on Wednesday, she promised them, "We are not playing around if she defeats Donald Trump this November." Her keynote address was scheduled weeks ago, but touching on topics such as abortion, gun control, and Project 2025, the vice president laid out the stakes of her candidacy. "We face a choice between two different visions for our nation," she told the crowd. "One focused on the future, the other focused on the past. With your support, I am fighting for our nation's future. So let us continue to fight," she added, "because when we fight, we win." Give your thoughts. We appreciate you viewing this video. To receive future updates, subscribe. The gunman who targeted Donald Trump at a campaign rally earlier this month researched the assassination of John F. Kennedy in the days before the shooting, FBI Director Christopher Wray has said. Mr. Wray testified on Wednesday before the House Judiciary Committee about the 13 July shooting at the Butler, Pennsylvania campaign. A bullet grazed Trump's right ear, and the attack left one rally audience member dead and two others badly wounded. The gunman also used a firearm with a collapsible stock, likely making it easier to conceal, Mr. Wray said. In his opening remarks, the FBI director called the attempted assassination of Trump an attack on our democracy and our democratic process. We will not and do not tolerate political violence of any kind, especially a despicable account of this magnitude, he told lawmakers. Mr. Wray said that on 6 July, a week before the shooting, the gunman searched how far away was Oswald from Kennedy online and registered for the Trump rally. Lee Harvey Oswald shot and killed President Kennedy in 1963. The FBI head said on Wednesday that the agency still does not have a motive for the assassination attempt, but the gunman appears to have become very focused on Trump a week before the shooting. Investigators also found the gunman had conducted searches for news articles about other public figures. Mr. Wray said the shooter fired at least 8 shots. Officials recovered 8 cartridges on the roof where the gunman, identified as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, was located. Crooks was killed by a counter-sniper during the incident. The AR-style rifle used in the shooting had a collapsible stock, which can make a weapon shorter and easier to transport. The first people to see the gunman with a rifle did so when he was already on the roof from where he fired, Mr. Wray said. He added that a local officer observed the gunman seconds before he fired shots. Investigators are working to determine whether Crooks took the gun onto the roof or if it was placed there in advance. The FBI director also confirmed that the gunman flew a drone over the rally about 2 hours before the shooting. Additionally, the FBI found 3 relatively crude explosive devices, one in the gunman's home and 2 others in his car. These devices were capable of being detonated remotely, and the gunman had a transmitter, Mr. Wray said. It did not appear as if the Crooks would have been able to detonate them from the roof where he was perched at the time of the shooting, he added. The investigation also revealed the gunman went to a shooting range where he fired an AR-style rifle the day before the rally. The FBI believes it to be the same weapon used in the assassination attempt. Mr. Wray said there is no evidence that the gunman planned the attack with others. Investigators are exploring a number of Crooks' digital devices, he said, adding that the shooter meets the description of a loner and had few contacts in his phone. Upon searching his home, officials found about 14 firearms associated with him and his family. The FBI is handling the criminal investigation into the attempted assassination, and Mr. Wray told the committee the agency will leave no stone unturned. The men and women of the FBI will continue to work tirelessly to get to the bottom of what happened, he said. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle resigned from her position on Tuesday after testifying before a different congressional committee earlier this week. She faced calls from both Democrats and Republicans to step down after the contentious hearing, during which lawmakers became increasingly frustrated after she refused to answer questions about the attempted assassination. Share your feedback. Subscribe for more. The man accused of stabbing writer Sir Salman Rushdie in 2022 in New York now faces a new charge of supporting a terrorist group. Hadi Matar has been charged with providing material support to the Lebanon-based militant group Hezbollah, according to an indictment unsealed on Wednesday. The federal charges come weeks after Mr. Matar rejected an offer from prosecutors that would have sentenced him to prison for a shorter period of time if he pleaded guilty. He is also charged with attempted murder and assault for the 2022 attack, which left Mr. Rushdie blind in one eye. Mr. Matar's lawyer, Nathaniel Barone, told the BBC his client plans to plead not guilty to to the new charges. "We plan on zealously and feverishly defending him on these matters," Mr. Barone said, adding that his client maintains his innocence on all the charges brought against him. He has been held without bail since the attack. The indictment said Mr. Matter attempted to provide material support and resources to Hezbollah, knowing it was a terrorist organization, but the document did not detail what evidence connected him to the group. Hezbollah is designated a terrorist organization by Western states, Israel, Gulf Arab countries, and the Arab League. It remains unclear exactly why the 26-year-old New Jersey resident attacked the famed British author, though he told the New York Post in an interview from jail that he had watched videos of Sir Salman on YouTube. "I don't like people who are disingenuous like that." In an interview with the BBC earlier this year, Sir Salman recalled Mr. Mattar sprinting up the stairs and stabbing him 12 times. "I couldn't have fought him," he said of the attack that lasted 27 seconds. "I couldn't have run away from him." The attack left him in hospital for 6 weeks recovering from his injuries. Sir Salman's memoir about the incident, Knife Meditations After an Attempted Murder, was released earlier this year. A woman who was raped by former fashion mogul Peter Nygaard decades ago told a Canadian court that the incident left her traumatized for years. "It breaks my heart to reflect on the derailment of my life caused by this," said the woman, who was assaulted by Nygaard in 1989 when she was in her 20s. Nygaard, once the head of a lucrative global apparel empire, is being sentenced this week for sexually assaulting 4 women. The 83-year-old was convicted last November by a Toronto jury, having denied the charges. Nygaard appeared in person in a Toronto courtroom for the beginning of his sentencing hearing on Wednesday, and was wearing a black sweatshirt with its hood up and a black puffer jacket over top. He wore a face mask and what appeared to be a visor, and his face was barely visible. His 2-day sentencing, scheduled for Wednesday and Thursday, had been repeatedly pushed back, with 2 of his lawyers resigning over ethical concerns, causing delays. Nygaard listened silently as victim impact statements were read in court, including from 3 of his accusers who detailed how the assaults left them with severe depression and anxiety, and in some instances, derailed their careers. "The actions that Nygaard took have impacted my life in a debilitating way," said one woman. "I did not feel safe being seen. Therefore, I did not trust men and did not engage in long-term relationships with anyone for my entire life," she said. "Now, a 63-year-old woman, I'm deeply saddened by the lack of love in my life." The sentencing will not be the end of Nygaard's legal challenges. He faces separate sexual assault and sex trafficking charges in Montreal, Winnipeg, and in the US. He has denied any wrongdoing and the other charges have not been tested in court. Nygaard is accused of using his influence and wealth to systematically assault and traffic women in both the US and Canada over a number of decades, when he was at the helm Nygaard International, his global clothing design and manufacturing business. Over his 6-week criminal trial in Toronto last autumn, prosecutors argued that Nygaard, once estimated to be worth at least $700 million, £542 million, used his status to assault 5 women in a series of incidents that occurred from the late 1980s to 2005. Most of the women detailed similar stories, in which Nygaard lured them with the promise of work or professional help in the fashion industry. Each of them were then invited separately to a tour by Nygaard at his Toronto office that ended in his private bedroom suite. One prosecutor described the room as having a giant bed and a bar and doors with no handles and automatic locks controlled by Peter Nygaard. Nygaard then raped or sexually assaulted the women inside the bedroom, the court heard. The victims were aged 16 to 28 at the time. On Wednesday, Crown Prosecutor Neville Golwala asked Toronto Superior Court Justice Robert Goldstein to sentence Nygaard to 15 years, which he said would take into account his crimes as well as time already served behind bars. "It took decades for these women to get justice and for their experiences to be validated," he added. His lawyer Gary Reber asked for a lesser sentence, citing Nygaard's age and deteriorating health. The court heard that chronic pain has limited his mobility, and he has type 2 diabetes and glaucoma that requires surgery. Ms. Weber argued a lengthy sentence would reduce his life expectancy and would deprive him of any hope of release or rehabilitation. Nygaard has been in custody since his arrest in late 2020. He has been held at an infirmary inside a Toronto detention centre, the court heard, where he has been afforded privileges like his own phone and access to email through his assistant. During the Toronto trial last year, his defense lawyers argued that his accusers, who are also part of a U.S. class action lawsuit filed on behalf of his alleged victims, were motivated by financial gain. Nygaard also claimed during the trial that he did not recall 4 of the 5 women in the case, and that he would have never acted in that kind of manner. A jury found him guilty on 4 counts and not guilty on a 5th count of sexual assault, and on 1 count of forcible confinement. Nygaard will now face another sexual assault case in Montreal, where he has been charged with assaulting and forcibly confining a woman more than 2 decades ago. A preliminary inquiry in that case is set to begin in January 2025. Nygaard is also facing charges in Winnipeg related to offences allegedly committed in 1993, involving a woman who was 20 years old at the time. In that case, he is alleged to have held the woman captive and raped her after inviting her to a modelling job. He has denied the charges. Once his criminal cases in Canada are completed, he is expected to be extradited to the US, where authorities claim he engaged in a decades-long pattern of criminal conduct involving at least a dozen victims across the globe. The US Department of Justice charged him with sex trafficking and racketeering offences and accused him of targeting women and minor-aged girls who came from disadvantaged economic backgrounds or had a history of abuse. A separate class action lawsuit has also been filed against him by 57 women in the US, though it was put on hold amid his criminal proceedings. In 2020, Nygaard stepped down as chairman of his firm shortly before it filed for bankruptcy after US authorities raided its New York headquarters. Subscribe for more. Financial markets in the US and Asia have fallen sharply as investors sell off shares in technology companies. With artificial intelligence, AI stocks hit particularly hard. In Wednesday's trading in New York, the S&P 500 lost 2.3% and the tech-heavy Nasdaq fell 3.6% in their biggest one-day fall since 2022. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped by 1.2%. The losses were driven by major firms including Nvidia, Alphabet, Microsoft, Apple, and Tesla. On Thursday, Japan's Nikkei index led declines in Asia as it fell by more than 3%. Shares in technology companies, especially those related to AI, have driven much of this year's stock market gains. AI chip giant Nvidia, which has been one of the main beneficiaries of the AI boom, saw its shares drop 6.8%. It has lost about 15% of its value in the last 2 weeks. The company is set to report financial results at the end of August. Shares in multi-billionaire Elon Musk's electric car maker Tesla dropped by more than 12% after its latest financial results disappointed investors. Google and YouTube parent company Alphabet's stock price was 5% lower. Earlier this week, the company reported financial results that beat analyst expectations, but said its spending would stay high for the rest of 2024. Alphabet, like many of its competitors, has been pumping billions of dollars into the development and adoption of AI technology. In Asia, chip makers Renesas Electronics and Tokyo Electron in Japan and South Korea's SK Hynix were amongst the big fallers. Investors are now becoming more concerned about all this expenditure with AI without the revenue benefit, said Junbei Liu, portfolio manager at Tribeca Investment Partners. I don't think this will mark the start of the disbelief in AI. It just simply means investors will focus more on returns in this space than just buying the whole sector, she added. Investors are also wary after major surprises in the US presidential election campaign and the timing of an interest rate cut by the US central bank. 55 years after it sank, killing 21 men, Australia has found the shipwreck of the MV Nunga. The 71 Mays, 295th freighter was carrying steel off the coast of New South Wales when it ran into stormy weather in 1969, sparking one of the biggest maritime searches in Australian history. 5 of the 26 crewmen were plucked from the water in the hours after the vessel sank, but only one body was ever recovered from those lost at sea. The location of the wreck has now been confirmed by Australia's science agency using high-resolution seafloor mapping and video footage. Only minutes after sending a distress signal on 25th of August, the ship had sunk in heavy seas. Royal Australian Navy destroyers, minesweepers, planes, helicopters and a number of other vessels launched a massive search as rescue crews also combed the shore for any sign of survivors. Over the next 12 hours, they found 2 men at sea in 2 separate life rafts, and 3 more clinging to a plank of wood, according to local media. The fate of the rest of the crew and the ship itself have been a mystery ever since. Locals first spotted a wreck years ago in deep water off the coast of Southwest Rocks, about 460 km and 286 miles north of Sydney, and reported its coordinates to authorities. There have long been suspicions that it may be the Noongar, but the technology or diving knowledge needed to identify the ship was not available. But last month, a high-tech ship owned by the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, CSIRO, was sent to investigate further. They found the wreck largely intact and sitting upright on the sea floor, 170 metres below the surface. All its key dimensions matched the Noongar, the CSIRO said. The Sydney project, which finds and documents the wrecks of lost ships, is now planning a dive to collect additional vision from the site in the hope of shedding light on why the ship sank. This tragedy is still very much in the memory of many in the community, CSIRO's Matt Kimber said. We hope that knowing the resting place of the vessel brings some closure for all. Surviving family members of the crew told the Australian Broadcasting Corporation the discovery is a relief. It's always been in the back of my mind, Pamela Hendy, the widow of Captain Leo Boatsman, said.